So, how could a Biden victory in South Carolina change the landscape for Super Tuesday? Of course, Team Rising knows all the answers.
Indeed, they always do. We're back with Hill National political reporter Jonathan Easley and founder of Claffey Communications, Lauren Claffey. She previously served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the Department of Homeland Security. And Jonathan, pick up on a point you were making in the last segment about, okay, Biden's going to potentially win. That's what it looks like, unless there's a big upset here, South Carolina. How is he able to capitalize on that, though, when Super Tuesday is just days away? He doesn't have much infrastructure in the state. He doesn't have much money to spend. He doesn't have much in the way of volunteers or enthusiasm. Will he be able to actually significantly shift the dynamics going into Super Tuesday?
Well, look, the Biden campaign is banking on that. They're banking on a flood of money coming in after he wins South Carolina. They're banking on, headlines about comeback Joe, working his way back into this contest. But I mean, time is working against him. He's got 72 hours after Saturday to basically get up and running in this national campaign, 14 states. The two biggest prizes, obviously, Texas and California.
Let's actually I think we've got a map of all the Super Tuesday states. While you're talking, go ahead, Texas and California.
Yeah. I mean, Bernie's looking at a big victory in California right now. He's going to win in Colorado, probably Utah, North Carolina. We were talking about him leading Maine. He's probably going to win Elizabeth Warren's home state of Massachusetts, which could potentially knock her out of the contest. I don't know. He's looking at steamrolling the field in a lot of these states.
Got a good feeling about him for Vermont.
Yeah, he's probably going to win in Vermont. I think you're right.
That's the question I've been asking here, Lauren, is can Elizabeth Warren stay in this race if you don't win your own home state? I think it's embarrassing if you can't win.
It's embarrassing, but I mean, listen, people stay in races as long as they have money.
Yeah.
Like, that's really what it boils down to. If you can stay in and you're still fundraising and you can still fund yourself, you're staying in. And so I think
I don't know that she has much money, though.
She did that last fundraising, plea. Remember that video where she was literally begging for money?
What she was like, some college kid came up to me and had $6 and she gave me $3, and I'm like, how do you take this woman's money when you can't even win your own home state? What's wrong with you?
You gotta stay in at all costs, fighting the good fight, according to her.
Right.
So I mean, really, I think that's what it's going to boil down to. Is how much money did people blast on advertising for Super Tuesday? What do they have left in the bank, and can they keep going? Because it's not that they get embarrassed, and it's not that they think that they can't do it anymore. It's can they pull the money to keep going?
Yeah. Well, and there's a new poll out of Massachusetts today that shows her down pretty significantly to Bernie Sanders. That's a poll that previously in October had her up, I think by 20 points. I mean, it used to not be close, and now Bernie is decidedly leading her in her home state. He's investing a lot of resources there. I believe that's where he'll actually be. Is that where he's going to be on Saturday instead of South Carolina? Yeah. So they are clearly playing to win there. Weigh in on that point. Do you think if she loses in her own home state, do you think she gets out of the race?
Well, she's sending mixed signals right now. She was asked about it at a CNN town hall, and I mean, she really leaned into this idea that, it's possible that no candidate gets a majority of the delegates, and if that's the case, she'll take it all the way to the convention and contest it. And she was challenged by a Bernie Sanders supporter about that on stage, and she was like, hey, Bernie Sanders made these rules. I didn't make the rules. He leaned on the DNC to change the way that superdelegates were counted in 2016, and so this is the game that we're all playing now. I mean, look,
pretty disingenuous.
You have to win your home state, especially if you're Elizabeth Warren.
How do you make the case to be the nominee?
East Coast liberal.
Yeah. If you can't win one state.
Well, maybe she's making the case to be the vice president.
Oh God! I mean, at this point, I don't.
What if she's just Bernie's running mate?
I will say, let's at least posit the scenario. Biden wins South Carolina. Yes, all caveats. He has no infrastructure, no nothing. But earned media is not nothing. Affinity for the former vice president is not nothing. Let's say, Jonathan, he does hit the 15% threshold in Texas. He does hit it in California, possibly. Colorado. And some of these other places like Oklahoma,
He could win
Arkansas.
some of these southern states.
He could even win Alabama, Tennessee. These are all places. North Carolina, where Bernie is beating him. He's still at 18% in the threshold. Let's say that does happen. So then the delegate math becomes very difficult for Bernie. And if Bloomberg also is in there, then these delegate-rich states are getting divided up 3 points maybe in Texas, or 3 times in Texas, 3 times in California, twice in Alabama. Broker convention seems a lot more likely.
Absolutely. It becomes a race, especially, I think, if Joe Biden wins by 15 or 20 points and this narrative catches hold that he's the sort of the candidate that moderate Democrats can get behind to stop Bernie Sanders. Like you said, there's polling is very sparse in some of these states. We don't know
we
how
live
some
like
of these,
two.
These states, especially in the deep South, are going to play out. Nobody knows what's going to happen in Alabama or Tennessee, I don't think. It's very possible that Joe Biden could sweep through those states and amass a big delegate haul there. And I think that does increase the likelihood that we see a contested convention. I mean, it seems to me that Bloomberg is sort of sinking right now, and I mean he's banked it all on
10%.
Yeah, which is meaningful too.
Right.
So I don't know, but I do think though if Joe Biden wins big in South Carolina on Saturday, it's a race. Whether it's a race for toward a contested convention or a more conventional race for a majority of delegates, I don't know, but it becomes closer.
I think the only person with a path to a majority of delegates that I can see is Bernie Sanders. Everybody else is basically playing just to try to keep him under that so that they can, get into the contested convention. The ironic thing about Bloomberg's candidacy at this point is he's basically explicitly in the race to stop Sanders, and yet he's helping Sanders at this point.
Yeah, you could make that argument because he's pulling away
Biden
supporters. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, he would argue that Biden's pulling away his supporters. So.
Yeah, right. Nate Silver said that Bloomberg is running the most expensive pro-Bernie super PAC that exists.
Yeah. And also, we just don't know how Bloomberg is going to. I mean, he hasn't been on the ballot in any of the...
He could massively underperform. I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean, he could surprise all of us with his, very slick marketing campaign and voter outreach in the Super Tuesday states, and all of a sudden, it's a different conversation. So we just haven't seen how he's performed beyond the polling yet, and, polling is always... We'll see, if it ends up being right, or if they oversampled, or if, I think the one that just came out of South Carolina, for example, was also polling independents and likely Democratic supporters.
Right.
So it wasn't even necessarily people who would be solid primary voters. So it could be an oversample there of Biden, for example.
Oh, interesting. Jonathan, I mean, that is the thing. We see Steyer collapsed in Nevada. As you pointed out, he's underperformed everywhere thus far. His support seems very soft. Do you think it'll be a similar dynamic with Bloomberg where, if you're just putting up paid communications and people are kind of seeing you everywhere and they're telling pollsters they're going to vote for you, but they don't ultimately show up at the polls?
Yeah, I mean, it would not surprise me to see Mike Bloomberg underperform. I mean, what we've seen throughout this race is the candidates that have the most durable base of supporters are the candidates that people are turning out for at their rallies on the ground, that are good at organizing, getting people out for early voting, that kind of thing. I mean, Mike Bloomberg has not been tested on that front at all. He's got about half the country on his payroll, so maybe those people are turning out for him. It's going to.
I'm not even sure that some of them are voting for him based on some of the reporting that we have.
Anecdotally, we know on this show that people are going to go work for him who will not vote for him.
I believe it.
There you go. All right, last question for both of you. Who do you think Lauren drops out after Super Tuesday?
Oh, I'm going to bet Klobuchar.
Klobuchar?
There we go.
What do you think?
I think Warren loses her home state and sees the writing on the wall and gets out of the race.
We'll see.
Does she endorse? Who does she endorse?
Well,
does she endorse?
Something maybe she sits on to.
Yeah, I think she might sit that way.
Wield some power.
Yeah, but you have to think Bernie at some point. But I don't know.
I'm not sure about that at this point.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank
Great to have you both. Few programming notes here. Watch for our primary state breakdowns this evening and every day until Super Tuesday. Later today, we're going to be talking about Alabama and Tennessee, two states that we have very little visibility into. We have a huge week next week here on Rising. You will not want to miss any of it. Not that you ever want to miss any of us. Monday, we're going to have results from the South Carolina primary and a preview of Super Tuesday. And on Super Tuesday, we will have live coverage starting at 9 p.m. on Tuesday night. We will be here until all of the polls close. As always, like, share, and subscribe to us on our Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We appreciate you all so much. Have a fabulous weekend.
Have a good weekend, everybody.